The whole thing began on a regular Wednesday night. My husband, Daniel, had headed out for a business dinner with his supervisor, a pattern that had grown familiar these last several months. I remained at home, surrounded by a silence that felt unusually heavy. I found myself on the living room sofa, watching the lamp's gentle light pool across the space, thinking about how Daniel and I had drifted into separate orbits lately. His career had consumed him entirely, and though I grasped the reasons why, a restless worry still gnawed at the edges of my mind. The doorbell chimed just as I was adding honey to my tea, a sound that seemed to echo louder than it should in the stillness. Nobody was expected, so I assumed it might be someone from the neighborhood, or perhaps a package delivery. But standing on my doorstep was Mr. Harper, Daniel's supervisor. He appeared somewhat awkward, weight shifting between his feet, clutching a slim envelope. "Hello, Laura," he said, his tone gentler than I'd anticipated. "Daniel left recently, correct?" I confirmed with a nod, taken aback. "Yes, only moments ago. Is something wrong?" He offered a faint smile and accepted my tentative invitation inside. His demeanor was understated, almost apologetic, yet something troubled flickered behind his expression that sparked my interest. He set the envelope down on the coffee table separating us and lowered himself into the armchair, across from me. The chair that always felt too stiff for our comfortable living space. "I couldn't leave without speaking to you," he began after a moment's pause, eyes fixed on his hands. "There's something regarding Daniel, something I believe you ought to understand." My pulse quickened. I couldn't predict what was coming. Compliments, concerns, perhaps even criticism. But his tone, so deliberately careful, pulled me forward in my seat. During the following minutes, he shared accounts of Daniel's workplace behavior, stories completely unknown to me. How he'd remained after hours assisting a floundering coworker, how he'd devoted himself to guiding newcomers, how his innovative spirit and compassion had quietly transformed the entire department atmosphere. I listened, mesmerized, but beyond that, I experienced an unexpected surge of feeling. Not exactly pride, not jealousy, not simple curiosity, something gentler and more profound, recognition of a dimension of my husband I seldom witnessed when he was fully himself. Then he raised his eyes to meet mine, truly met them, and spoke words I hadn't anticipated. Words that made my breathing catch. My fingers gripped the fabric of my dress unconsciously. It wasn't suggestive or even particularly personal in any conventional way. It was far more nuanced. A moment of genuine human connection, of acknowledgement, of perceiving someone completely without masks. That evening, as Mr. Harper stood to depart, I understood that my world, my peaceful, predictable existence, had tilted ever so slightly. Something had opened up, a fresh dimension of connection and comprehension, and I couldn't foresee where it might lead. By the time I secured the door behind him, the envelope still waiting on the coffee table, I experienced an unusual blend of excitement and contemplation. That envelope contained something important, and though Daniel remained unaware, I sensed that my life, perhaps even my heart, was about to be affected in ways I couldn't have imagined. I didn't unseal the envelope immediately. Instead, I remained on the sofa, studying it, as though the lamp's quiet hum and the clock's steady rhythm might somehow guide my decision. Part of me yearned to look inside, while another part held back. Something about the moment, the way Mr. Harper had regarded me before departing, made me sense that opening it prematurely might shatter some delicate, precious atmosphere in the room. Eventually, curiosity prevailed. I carefully opened the envelope and extracted a single page. It wasn't exactly a letter in the conventional sense. It read more like a note, written in tidy, careful handwriting that didn't align with the more straightforward, businesslike man I'd pictured from Daniel's descriptions. And it wasn't simply addressed to me. It felt crafted for me in a way that transcended ordinary social formalities. "Laura," it opened, "there are qualities in Daniel that most people overlook. He possesses a subtle strength, a forbearance that many misinterpret as aloofness, and a generosity extending well beyond what anyone in the office could recognize. I hope you realize how uncommon this is, and how profoundly he cherishes those around him. Tonight, I simply wanted you to understand that your husband is remarkable in ways not always apparent, and witnessing it has been an honor." I reviewed it twice, carefully, as if absorbing the cadence of each phrase, Then warmth flooded through me, like afternoon sunlight discovering a window I'd overlooked before. Pride, certainly, but also something more subtle. A deep awareness that the life Daniel and I shared held complexities I hadn't completely grasped. His everyday actions, his gentle humor, the way he squeezed my hand when he thought I wasn't paying attention. All of it now appeared illuminated differently. I sank deeper into the cushions, allowing my thoughts to drift, feeling a profound, almost tender wonder about Mr. Harper. What sort of person takes such time to reach out this way? To offer such genuine, heartfelt observation without expecting anything in return? There was elegance in his frankness, patience in how he approached something sensitive. And I found myself pondering, not romantically, but in a deeply human way, how someone could impact your existence simply through noticing it. That night, the house felt transformed somehow. The darkness seemed gentler, the atmosphere warmer. I poured wine and drifted into the kitchen, contemplating the understated moments that give life meaning. The way Daniel had chuckled that morning after splashing coffee on his collar, the way he'd kissed my temple before rushing out. Suddenly, those small fragments of routine life carried extraordinary significance. As I finally slipped the note into my cherished book on the shelf, I grasped something crucial. This transcended a mere gesture from Daniel's supervisor. It was a reflection revealing the portions of our lives often invisible. It reminded me that even after years of established patterns and comfortable habits, surprises still exist, discoveries still wait, moments still arrive that make your heart pause in wonder. By the time I retired that night, I felt an uncommon mixture of tranquility and expectation. I couldn't predict tomorrow's developments, or whether I'd ever discuss the note with Mr. Harper, but I knew I'd witnessed something precious, an unexpected kindness revealing more than just my husband's goodness. It had revealed a capacity for connection and insight I hadn't anticipated, and that realization remained with me, quiet yet insistent, as sleep finally arrived. The following morning, the envelope rested on the kitchen counter like an unspoken question. I prepared my coffee slowly, attempting to appreciate the routine, but my mind kept returning to the note and Mr. Harper's surprising visit. Something about how he'd addressed me, so measured, so intentional, left a persisting sense of closeness, the kind that demands nothing but simply asks to be recognized. Daniel had departed early again, as typical, and I found myself drifting through the house in a fog of reflection. I wandered into the study, the space where he devoted countless hours to his projects, and traced my fingers across the polished surface of his desk. His essence lingered in tiny, almost imperceptible ways. The subtle scent of his aftershave, the wrinkled notepad abandoned in the corner, a pen lying diagonal. It occurred to me that throughout all our years together, I had seldom paused to observe these minor details, and suddenly they felt like evidence of the man I thought I completely understood. Then, without warning, my phone rang. It was Mr. Harper. My heart jumped. I hadn't expected to hear from him again, and momentarily I contemplated not answering, but something within urged me to respond. "Laura." His voice emerged calm and measured. "I hope I'm not overstepping. I simply wanted to check in after yesterday evening, see how you're processing everything." I hesitated, then smiled gently. I've been reflecting considerably on what you expressed, about Daniel, about your perspective of him." My voice sounded fragile, even vulnerable to my own ears. "I'm pleased," he replied. "It wasn't merely about praising him. I suppose it was about recognizing the things that matter, the things frequently overlooked. And I felt you should know because you witnessed the other dimension of him, the one that's private, intimate, undefended." His words lingered in the space between us, and I realized this conversation, this exchange, exceeded polite professional courtesy. There was uncommon honesty in his manner of speaking, a patience and thoughtfulness that invited trust. I felt a tremor, not fear, not exactly desire, but a sharp electric awareness of being perceived in a way few people truly experience. We conversed for some time about minor things initially, then about larger truths, the burden of responsibility, the quiet methods people demonstrate love, the subtle actions that reveal character. He didn't rush me. He didn't demand anything. He simply shared his viewpoint, and in doing so opened a window into a perspective I had rarely considered. By the time I ended the call, I felt strangely lighter, as if a subtle layer of anxiety or tension had dissolved from my chest. I realized the experience wasn't about secrecy or scandal, certainly not about betrayal. It was about understanding, about recognizing that people are vaster and more intricate than the roles they inhabit. Later that afternoon, I found myself seated by the window, the envelope tucked in my lap, sunlight warming my cheeks. I thought about Daniel, the man I'd married, the man who carried both fortitude and vulnerability with quiet grace. And I thought about Mr. Harper, who had reminded me that noticing, acknowledging, and articulating the truth of someone's character could be a deeply moving, even transformative experience. In that gentle, still moment, I understood something profound. Life isn't only about the obvious displays, the shared laughter, or the rhythm of daily existence. It's about the hidden dimensions, the unexpected truths, and the quiet connections that make us feel genuinely alive. And sometimes those truths arrive in the most improbable forms, knocking softly on your door when you least anticipate them. That evening, Daniel returned home earlier than usual. The house carried the faint aroma of simmering stew, and the golden radiance from the kitchen lamp made everything feel softer, warmer. I welcomed him at the entrance with a quiet smile, attempting to contain the whirlwind of thoughts from the day. Part of me wanted to share everything, the note, the call, but another part recognized that some moments are meant to exist in their own delicate space, unspoken yet deeply understood. We settled into the living room with our tea, the kind of routine that always seemed unremarkable. Yet tonight felt subtly transformed. I observed him, truly observed, the way he rubbed his palms together when exhausted, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes when he smiled, and I felt a wave of thankfulness for the life we'd created together. "Demanding day?" I asked softly. He nodded, settling beside me on the couch. "The usual, but I wanted to return home early tonight just to be with you." And in that simple statement I comprehended everything. The ordinary gestures, the quiet devotion, the decades of shared history, all of it carried a weight and beauty that no letter, no phone call could fully capture. But somehow the experiences of these past days had provided a new lens through which I could perceive him, and through which I could perceive myself. I glanced at the envelope resting on the coffee table, now folded neatly. It wasn't a secret to conceal, nor a confession to make. It was a reminder of Daniel's quiet strength, of Mr. Harper's honesty, and of the way life continually invites us to notice, to feel, and to evolve. Later, after dinner, I found myself in the study again, the room that had felt so charged with curiosity and reflection. I picked up a pen and wrote several lines of my own, not to send, not even to show anyone, but to capture the sense of clarity that had settled over me. Sometimes understanding and connection don't require action. Sometimes simply recognizing them is sufficient. As I returned to the living room, Daniel was reading by the window, the soft lamplight making the pages glow. I sat beside him, and for the first time in ages, I felt the complete weight of contentment. Not the dramatic, obvious variety, but the quiet, steady warmth that comes from knowing the depth of a life shared. That night, as we settled into bed, I reflected on the unexpected lessons of recent days. Life has a way of surprising us, of nudging us into perceiving what we might otherwise miss. It's in the small acts of observation, the gentle truths spoken without fanfare, and the rare moments when someone reaches out with sincerity that we discover the most meaningful connections. I closed my eyes and thought about Mr. Harper's visit, the note, and the conversation that followed. But more importantly, I thought about Daniel, about the layers I hadn't noticed, the patience, the kindness, and the quiet brilliance that define who he is. And I realized that love in its truest form isn't just about what we see daily. It's about what we notice when we take the time to truly look. For the first time in ages, I felt fully present, fully connected, not just to Daniel, but to the small, intricate tapestry of life surrounding me. It was a lesson in observation, in appreciation, and in the subtle, unspoken bonds that make life rich and profoundly moving. And as I drifted into sleep, I carried with me a sense of peace, gratitude, and the quiet joy of having glimpsed something rare and beautiful.